Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of The Casual Criminalist. Oh, these ones are fun. The last two I've recorded for this podcast have been absolutely devastating, where it's like, and then he ate the child's insides. Yeah. But today, the worst police serial killer blunders of all time. Oh no, first I read it and I was like, serial killer blunders. But this just means I'm going to be getting really pissed off with how incompetent the police are. Anyway, this episode has been written by Matt. I've never read it before. We're going to read it. We're going to learn about it. We're going to react to it together. I mean, I am. You're going to listen. But, you know, it's you and me, friend. Let's jump in. Parasocial, isn't it? The police. The boys and girls in blue are charged with protecting the innocent and upholding the law. And while that might sound like a fantasy to a lot of people, that's what they're meant to be doing. However, over the lifetime of this channel, a theme has reared its ugly head time and time again, and that's police incompetence. Whether it's simple, understandable mistakes or a gross misstep of epic proportions, it has become the bane of this show and a constant headache for us writers. Honestly there, Matt, it's usually not the, understandable mistakes or the huge screw-ups. It's usually the ones in the middle where it's just like, they just don't give that much of a shit. Where it's like, yeah, it was a sex worker who was killed. They get killed all the time. Oh, yeah, that person ran away. I mean, people run away all the time. Oh, my God. Or it's like, that person's a bit powerful. Better leave them alone. And today we're going to look at several of the most notorious police blunders in modern history. That's right, dear audience. We're doing something a little new here. Now, usually we focus on a single killer or even have a list of killers with similar motives or age ranges, but today we're here to discuss a medley of serial killers, many of whom have already been covered in previous episodes, and they all have one thing in common. They would have been caught a hell of a lot sooner, and many of their victims would have lived to see another day if the cops had simply done their job. Indeed. So, strap in. These are the worst police serial killer blunders of all time. The Police versus Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer, the Milwaukee cannibal, undeniably one of the worst serial killers of all time, and one of the most well-known and infamous. Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer was born on May the 21st, 1960, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I've been to Milwaukee. Have I been to Milwaukee? I've been to Wisconsin. I think it was Milwaukee I went to. All I remember about Wisconsin is they're really into those little cheese balls. Cheese something? What do they call them in Wisconsin? Am I even thinking of Wisconsin? I'm pretty sure it's Wisconsin. I don't even remember. It doesn't matter at all. It's completely irrelevant. Let's move on. To Lionel Herbert Dahmer and Joyce Annette Dahmer. From an early age, he was neglected by his parents, leaving him craving not only attention but also companionship. This was mostly at the hands of his mother, as it's reported that she was very selfish and greedy and wanted all of the attention for herself, and he would start arguments about pretty much everything. Oh, I hate people like this, where it's just like, why do you have to be so combative about everything? And I know I'm also not the easiest person in the world, but it's like, god damn, some people just want to have a fight about everything. In conjunction with this, Jeffrey started acting out in school, taking on the image of the class clown to gain attention from those around him. As he got older, he began to show a fascination with dead things, starting with animals. Being the class clown, fine. Fascination with dead things, more concerning. He reportedly grew curious about how the animals fit together. What the fuck does that mean, Jeff? And apparently liked the noise bones made as they scraped and clacked against one another. Jesus Christ, get him to a psychiatrist. As he got older, though, Jeff's fascination turned more towards people, especially once he hit puberty and realized that he was homosexual. Not only did he have a fascination with death and dead bodies, but he also found himself with an overwhelming attraction to the attractive boys around school and in his town. This was when the 60s? Yeah, different back in the day, isn't it? Namely, he wanted to dominate these boys. Oh, okay. Wait. Render them unconscious and do as he pleased whilst they were knocked out and at his mercy. That's fucked up, Jeff. These thoughts, along with his issues at home and school, caused Jeffrey to turn to drink at only 14 years old, something that would be a constant through his life thereafter. If only he had turned to an anti-psychotic. Or what drugs can they give people like this? There must be drugs. There's a million drugs. There's 1,000 drugs. They fix everything. Get him on the drugs. Get him on some drugs that make him feel something other than rage. Whenever he could get beer, he would drink as much as he could, all while he did what he could to fit in with little success. During high school, all of his grades nosedived. He would graduate, but his need to dominate someone sexually was becoming an obsession, and his first murder would soon take place. Oh my lord. June the 18th, 1978. 18-year-old Stephen Hicks was beaten with a dumbbell and then strangled to death, all because Jeffrey found him attractive and didn't want him to leave. Well, there's one way to make someone leave permanently, Jeff, and that is to beat them with a dumbbell. You psycho. From there, he dismembered the body, disposed of it, and went about... So he's 18 years old at this point, right? He was born in May 1960. It's now June 1978. Bloody hell. And then he went on about his life. He went to college and the military, but his drinking and dark feelings would only allow him to go so far, so he returned home and ended up living with his grandmother. While there, he was arrested for several things, including indecent exposure and lewd and lascivious behavior. And he also murdered his next victim, 25-year-old Stephen Tuomi, before disposing of his body. You're getting arrested, right? Back in the day, that means... Ooh, is this before 1978? When did they start putting people's fingerprints into like a big system? Because I feel like his fingerprints need to be in a big system. What's it called? Codex? Codis? Codis? My knowledge of this is from CSI, so... And so it continued. 14-year-old James Dockstader was next, then 22-year-old Richard Guerrero. Both of whom were killed and dismembered in Dahmer's grandmother's house. And when she'd had enough of the bad smells emanating from his bedroom, she kicked him out. Oh my lord. He didn't stop. That wasn't even a thought in his mind. Getting an apartment of his own, he continued to hunt, continued to kill, and continued to dismember his victims. 32-year-old Raymond Smith, 27-year-old Edward Smith, 22-year-old Ernest Miller, 22-year-old David Thomas, 17-year-old Curtis Straughter, 19-year-old Errol Lindsay, 31-year-old Tony Hughes. They all fell victim to this depraved lunatic, a demented man who'd later claimed that he only wanted companionship and just wanted them to stay with him forever. Oh, so he'd done all he could to make that happen. Bro, you killed them. What the fuck's wrong with you? But with each kill, his methods became more and more depraved. He began keeping the bodies in his apartment, keeping their body parts stored around the place, and he started taking photos of their remains and his bloody process. Eventually, he would begin to dissolve them, rending the flesh and skin from their bones before bleaching them so that he could keep them as his silent, eternal trophies. Yeah, all right. I'm keeping them with me. That way they'll never leave. Jeffrey! And that's not even mentioning the acts of cannibalism. Oh, right, yes, the Milwaukee cannibal. Right, how about you just stick to those weird cheese things? How he would cook parts of their meat and organs and devour them like they were flank steak. He'd later claimed that, quote, "It was my way of remembering their appearance, their physical beauty. I also wanted to keep, if I couldn't keep them with me as a whole, at least I could keep their skeletons." So with this said and done, how did the police fuck this one up? Well, 2 words. Conorak synthasomphone. It was May 1926. Sorry, no it wasn't. It was May the 26th, 1991. Makes a lot more sense. When the 31-year-old Dahmer came across the boy whose death should have alerted the police that Dahmer was up to no good. 14-year-old Conorak was walking on Wisconsin Avenue when he was approached by the tall, blonde, bespectacled man who offered him money for a simple task, to act as a model for his pictures. Bruh, if you are 14 years old and some older dude is like, come to my apartment and take some pictures. I'm a photographer. Don't go. Okay? Don't go. It's not an opportunity, it's a trap. It's a trap! What neither of them knew, or perhaps remembered, was that Dahmer had actually sexually assaulted Conorak's older brother years prior. At first, Conorak was hesitant, but figuring it would be easy money, he went with him. The next morning, May 27th, 1991, a call came through at 2 a.m. to the dispatchers at 911 from 17-year-old Nicole Chidrus, quoting, "I'm on 25th and State, and there's this young man. He is buck naked, and he has been beaten up. He is very bruised up. He can't stand. He has no clothes on. He is really hurt." Conorak had escaped from Dahmer's apartment. He wasn't wearing any clothes, he was terribly injured, and blood was pouring from his head. When Dahmer's neighbors asked him what had happened and who'd hurt him, the boy could barely speak, only managing words in his native Lao, as if his language skills had been dulled, if not outright taken away. Nicole and her family did all they could to keep him warm and keep him safe as they contacted both the police and the fire department, but they didn't realize that all the blood was coming from a gaping hole in his head that was hidden under his hair. You see, Dahmer... Jesus Christ, I forgot about this. I know we've covered Dahmer, but god damn. Had attempted to turn Conorak into a living sex doll. It drilled a hole in the 14-year-old's head, then poured hydrochloric acid into the hole. The resulting damage to Conorac's frontal lobe meant that he could barely speak and had essentially been turned into a zombie. But then Dahmer came home. He'd gone out to drink at a bar nearby and had picked up more alcohol for the apartment when he came upon the scene of Conorac being fussed over. He approached Nicole and her family and said that Conorac was his boyfriend, that he was 19 and that his name was John Hmog. The ladies weren't buying it, especially since Conorac was a literal child, and they did their best to keep him safe until the police arrived. Sadly, they weren't able to save his life. Milwaukee police officers John Balzazak and Joseph Garbrish arrived, and Dahmer turned on his charm. What little he had of that. He said Conorac was his lover, that he was an adult, and that he had simply gotten too intoxicated and had hurt himself as a result. And the communication from the dispatch 15 minutes later, quote, "The intoxicated Asian naked male," laughter in the background, was returned to his sober boyfriend. More laughter. Christ almighty, police. This is another one of those things where it's not just like crazy incompetence, it's just like, oh, the gays. They do what they do. Christ. We can already see the issue, right? In a word, prejudice. Exactly. To the cops, it was nothing more than a gay lover's spat, no more, no less, easily resolved. They didn't even question the fact that a blood-covered Conorac had been unable to speak up for himself. At least take him to the hospital. And to think the officers had another chance right afterwards because they went to check out Dahmer's apartment. Okay, good idea. Maybe, at least do that. Despite the fact that the entire place reeked of death, they didn't think to mention it or try to find out why the apartment smelled like something or someone had died in it. After all, Dahmer had shown them pictures of Conorac in suggestive poses in his underwear. And that was all they needed to see. Just a gay lover spat, right? Nothing to be worried about or investigated. They're probably like, smells funny in here. Maybe that's just the smell of gay. Like, what the fuck? I know it's the 70s or whatever, but fuck hell, police. They allowed Dahmer to keep him, somehow missing the bleeding hole in his skull, and they disregarded everything the worried women were saying, literally telling them to butt out and shut the fuck up. I mean, I don't know if they said exactly that, but essentially. With that, they went on their way. A job well done in their minds. Oh my god. And almost immediately after, Dahmer killed Conorac and added the poor boy to his collection. And because of the police's terrible negligence, 4 more men died by Dahmer's hands. Next up were 20-year-old Matt Turner, 23-year-old Jeremiah Weinberger, 24-year-old Oliver Lacey, and 25-year-old Joseph Bradyhoft. All of their bodies were dismembered, placed in acid, and their bones added to his growing collection. Thankfully, we all know how this story ended. Another victim managed to escape, and the cops showed up and arrested him. However, this victim was still able to speak for himself, so he told the officers about the horrors he'd experienced and led them straight into hell. As a result, Jeffrey Dahmer was sentenced to spend the rest of his life in prison, but his prison sentence came to an abrupt end when he was, wait for it, get ready, the tiniest violin ever. He was murdered behind bars. Oh, no. Oh, what a shame, said no one fucking ever. But the fact of the matter is the police had fucked up, committing a blunder of blunders, one that cost 4 young men their lives. And if they'd only listened to Dahmer's concerned neighbors, if they'd only taken the time and investigated Conorac's situation properly, if they had only done their job and not given in to their senseless homophobic prejudice, Jeffrey Dahmer could have been stopped much earlier. Yeah. All I can say to that is no fuck. And I'm just glad Dahmer got murdered in prison as he deserved. We don't have any details of his murder here, but I hope that it was really unpleasant. It probably was. I think people like Dahmer don't do particularly well in prison. Police versus Anthony Sowell. This next one, I personally covered for this channel at Simon's request a few years ago. There we go. And the police just did a horrible job overall. Anthony Sowell, the Cleveland Strangler, is one of the most grotesque killers I've ever had the displeasure, sorry Matt, of covering. Despite being active for only 2 years, he terrorized the ladies of Cleveland and murdered a total of 11 women. And sadly, there were not one, but at least 2 instances where he could have been brought to justice, but he simply wasn't. Born on August the 19th, 1959, in East Cleveland, he was one of 7 children, born to Claudia Gertrude Garrison, an abusive woman who had no problem beating and berating her children over the smallest of issues. And when the other adult members of his family, particularly the male one, started in on him too, that only made things worse. He saw that the world was a violent one, and that it was okay to hurt those beneath you, especially women. That's a good message to send your fucking children, isn't it? Christ. I mean, when a boy starts sexually assaulting his own niece at the age of 10, it doesn't exactly look like it'll be a productive member of society, does it? No, it doesn't, Matt. Christ. As soon as he turned 18, Sal joined the US Marines and thrived. Excellent. I would like this to be the moment when his life turns around and he gets discipline drilled into him and he leaves the Marines with skills and an excellent resume and he goes on to I don't know, have a career in the Marines or find work as a productive member of society. But I get the feeling that's not what's going to happen. And the reason I get that feeling is Matt's already told us he murders 11 people like a fucking psycho. Strict discipline, order, and routine seemed to be exactly what he needed, and he seemed to enjoy the stability that the military gave him. Sadly, it wouldn't last, as he ended up being honorably discharged from the military on January the 18th, 1985, after serving for 7 years. 7 years is like the standard stint, right, which feels so long. Because really, it's when you, unless I'm wrong, right, you join the military, you sign up, and then you got 7 years, and it's like, you can't quit. It's like, they own your ass. It's like, okay. After that, things went downhill fast. Alone and jobless, he took solace in drugs and alcohol, and soon enough, the violence instilled in him in his youth reared its head when he invited a pregnant woman back to his place. Oh my lord. He bound her, gagged her, tortured her, and then sexually assaulted her. But thankfully, she escaped before anything else could happen and reported him to the cops, who then arrested him. Great. Let's get him in prison forever. Charged with kidnapping, sexual assault, and attempted sexual assault, Sal was offered a plea deal of 15 years, which he gladly took. Oh no, is he really going to go to prison for 15 years, then get released, then crack on? I know I've covered this before, but I've entirely forgotten. Inside, he once again seemed to thrive under the strictness and order of the prison, but as soon as he got out, all that went out the window. More drugs, more alcohol, and soon his need to hurt and violate became undeniable. And after he moved into 2205 Imperial Avenue in Cleveland, Ohio, women began to vanish and die. 35-year-old Crystal Dozier was the first to go, followed by 33-year-old nursing assistant Tiziana Culver. Both were mothers, both were addicts, and both were lured into Sal's house where they were defiled, murdered, and buried. Both of their families reported them as missing, but from what the cops could tell, they were just a couple of black, drug-addicted women, no big loss, and so nothing was done. And I wish I was lying about that. Yeah, this is another one where it's just like, it's not some huge, incompetence by the police. It's not some small incompetence. It's just this, they just don't give a fuck. Especially if you fall into any sort of minority. They just don't care. It's fucking crazy. And on top of that, as soon as the smell of decomposing remains started reeking up the entire neighborhood, the cops also paid no mind to that shit. They're like, no, it smells like minority. That's a rotting minority. No one cares. And on top of that, they blamed the smell on the corner store right across the street, which just happened to be run by folks of the Arab persuasion. And the police claimed that the store was the cause of the smell. Now, ignorant isn't even close to a strong enough word here, and when the smell eventually got worse, they couldn't blame it on the Arab owners anymore, so instead they turned to the sausage store named Ray's Sausage Shop that was located next door to 2205 Imperial Avenue and blamed it on the store's poor ventilation system. Bruh, if your sausage shop smells like that, it doesn't matter how good your ventilation store is, something is wrong. And it's not the sausage store, guys. Then they missed the first indicator that someone was killing black women in the area. Vanessa Gay, another African-American woman who had been addicted to drugs, was approached by Sal with the offer of smoke and a drink. Vanessa agreed, went back to his house, and upon stepping through the front door, she was instantly met with a fist to the face. He forced her to strip naked, sexually assaulted her repeatedly, and even when Vanessa managed to escape and tell the police what happened to her, the police did not help her. The reason? Well, you see, Simon, back in 2000, this was in 2008. Oh God, that's so alarmingly recently. I mean, I know it's like 20 years ago now, but goddamn, I remember 2008. The Cleveland police simply didn't have a proper procedure when it came to dealing with the victims of sexual assault, and even less so when it seemed the victim was a drug addict. In other words, they simply couldn't be bothered and more women would die as a result. Yeah, there it is again. They simply couldn't be bothered, right? Make an effort. It's your fucking job. 3 women fell into Sal's clutches after that chance was lost. Those being 25-year-old LaShonda Long, 45-year-old Michelle Mason, and 53-year-old Tonya Carmichael. And then another chance to capture Sal occurred in December of 2008. Gladys Wade was simply out and about, minding her own business, when Sal pounced on her. No charm, no finesse. He simply jumped on her at the corner store by his home and dragged her all the way into his house. In broad daylight. He beat her for several minutes, threw her through a nearby glass pane, and was getting ready to assault her. Gladys was a fighter, though. She hit and clawed at him until she managed to escape from the house. She ran to a nearby police car, told them what had happened, and together they went back to the house. You'd think that this was where the creep would get arrested and that we could end the story there, but despite Gladys' story and the undoubtedly god-awful smell of the property, the police believed Sal when he told them that Gladys had tried to rob him. And what did they actually end up doing? They arrested both of them, and then, after Gladys was treated for her wounds, they just let them go. And even more women ended up dead because of it. Oh, and how could we forget that another woman was said to have been attacked, allowed to live, and after a wreck was done, it simply sat on a shelf gathering dust at the police station. The police in Cleveland, Ohio simply did not care. That much seems obvious, and quite frankly, neither did Sal, since he was allowing all of these women to live, and yet no one seemed to be making a fuss about it. Dirtbag probably thought that he was unstoppable. Thankfully, that wasn't the case, and he was eventually caught on Halloween of 2009. And guess what the cops found when they actually did their job and searched his property? Well, they found a lot of bodies, that's what. They were all either rotting within his home or nonchalantly buried in his back garden. He would eventually be charged with 11 counts of aggravated murder and 74 counts of rape, kidnapping, tampering with evidence, and abuse of a corpse. Anthony Sal was found guilty on all but 2 counts on July the 22nd, 2011, and was sentenced to death. Excellent! For his villainy. On August the 12th. He never did make it to the needle, though, as he ended up dying of an undisclosed illness on February the 8th, 2021. Oh no. Yeah, it is a shame they didn't get to execute him. I'd have rather seen him executed, to be honest. Sure, that's pretty stressful. F that twat. Police versus Paul Bernardo. For this one, we're heading to the Great White North of Canada, and we're taking a look at one of the most infamous serial killers in the country's history, one that still gets talked about today, Paul Bernardo, the Scarborough the schoolgirl killer. And that's just his nicknames for when he acted alone. Paul and his equally psycho girlfriend, Karla Homolka, were known as the Ken and Barbie killers. For 8 years, whether on his own or the two of them together, they kidnapped, sexually assaulted, and killed numerous girls, many of them younger than 20, striking fear all throughout Toronto, Ontario. Born in Scarborough, Ontario, on August 27, 1964, Paul was the third and youngest child of Kenneth Walter Bernardo and Marilyn Elizabeth Bernardo. But life was already in the toilet for old Paul from the word go. His father, Kenneth, was a PDF file. Oh no! This is what we have to say for YouTube, because otherwise we get demonetized, but you know what I mean. And habitually used his own daughter, Paul's big sister Deborah, for his own sexual satisfaction. Ugh. This certainly set Paul down the wrong path mentally, especially after his mother admitted to him that he was the product of an extramarital affair. He started despising his mum after that, referring to her as a slut and a whore, all while she called him a bastard from hell. Oh my god, your upbringing is incredibly fucked up. Still, that's no excuse to become a murderer, Paul, you douchebag. Sadly, she wasn't too far off, as by that time, he'd burned his ex-girlfriend's things after she'd dumped him for a friend, enjoyed humiliating his subsequent dates and girlfriends in public and during sex, and regularly fantasized about breeding virgins for sexual purposes on his personal virgin farm. Bruh. We've covered this man before on this channel, but it never gets any less disturbing. Virgin farm should not be two words that ever go together, Paul. What the fuck? Eventually, in 1987, Paul found a kindred spirit in Karla Homolka. She was visiting Scarborough to attend a pet convention, and the two just hit it off. Crazy draws crazy, I suppose. After he started dating Karla, Paul became very open about his wants, desires, and his sick and twisted needs, which by this point he'd already taken steps to fulfill. Not the virgin farm, thank God for that, but his need to dominate, humiliate, and defile was so strong that he decided that he would satiate it however he could, with whoever he could. Between 1986 to 1990, Paul terrorized the people of Scarborough. For 4 years he prowled and stalked the streets, looking for unsuspecting women and girls, and specifically targeting those who got off the bus in the late afternoon. He'd follow them home, grab them, force them down, and then violate them then and there. He didn't even wait for them to get inside. He was brash enough to attack them right out in front of their homes, or would drag them to the backyard to do it. He attacked at least 14 women and girls. with the youngest of his victims being only 15. But we also know that at least 6 women managed to escape after they or passers-by had either managed to fight him off, chase him off, or scare him away. 6 women, which I'm sure was reported to the police. Can't we put this shit together? One time he was spotted by a police officer, and even though the cop gave chase, Paul managed to slip away. So, how'd the police fuck this one up? Great question, Matt. Let's find out. Towards the end of 1990, all of Scarborough was terrified, and women were hesitant to even walk the streets alone in the evening in fear of the man now known as the Scarborough Ripper. By then, a whole task force had been formed in order to track this maniac down, but they were making little progress. To be fair, they did have a composite sketch based on the description of the last victim at that time, one that was remarkably close to what Paul actually looked like. Excellent! But then they got a tip, one pointing right in the direction of Paul Bernardo. All right, let's lock it down, boys. Let's go. This tip was from Tina Smyrnis, and she knew Paul rather well since her husband was actually a close personal friend of the man. She'd seen the sketch, saw the striking similarities, and informed them that not only did Paul talk all the time about how he liked rough, borderline painful sex, but he had also been called into the police station to be questioned over a sexual assault back in 1987, but he was never formally charged. Again, a screw-up. But that's not the big one that we're here to talk about. No, this is like, not great police work, but not like catastrophically bad. I mean, it's catastrophically bad because of the outcome. But it's like, I'm not crazy on the police for that one. But here we go. Paul was soon called in after that and sat down for a formal interview. When he was asked why he thought he was being interviewed, Paul didn't mince any words, saying it was because he looked an awful lot like the predator they were hunting for. I wonder why. Not much ground was broken at this point, especially since Paul was seen as much more reliable than Tina. But then November came around, and it was then that Paul did something monumentally stupid, or arrogant, whatever you like. You see, from May to September of 1990, the police had been gathering DNA samples from a large number of suspects, over 130 in fact. So what do you think Paul Bernardo, in his moronic cockiness, willingly volunteered to give? Yeah, he agreed to give the police a DNA sample. No problem. Anything to get him off their suspect list. Paul, do you not understand how DNA works? It's like, no, I'll get away with this. I'll give them my DNA, which I've been leaving at all the crime scenes. You fucking idiot. But here's the twist. The sample sat in the lab, untested, for 2 years. We're not joking. All they had to do was test that sample, and they would have known who the Scarborough Ripper was. Now, from what I understand, back in 1990, it could take between 6 to 8 weeks to fully test a DNA sample, and they had over 130 to work with. But last time I checked, nothing was stopping them from having multiple people testing multiple samples at the same time. They might not have gotten him right away, but they damn sure would have gotten him much sooner than they did. Was this actually a matter of there was a giant queue and it wasn't given priority because there was other stuff in the queue that was just as important? I mean, I struggle to see how something isn't as important as a multiple case like this one, but I mean, I don't know. It was 1990. I'm sure this shit was real slow. Maybe they didn't have the machines for it. I don't know. It's the 90s. And while the sample collected dust, waiting on its turn in line, women died. I get it. And maybe this is those other 130 samples were just not as important. They can't have been, right? Because this is such a serious crime. They should be ranked by, they should be, what's that word in medicine where they decide on the most serious? Triage. They should triage these, so the most important ones get pushed to the front, and then the ones for like, oh, well, yeah, that burglar guy, maybe we can bump that down a little bit. Because they suspect him of being at this incredibly bad predator. So maybe we can bump into the front of the queue, guys? Tonight? Maybe seems like a good idea? Do some triage? Paul Bernardo, alongside Carla Homolka, graduated from sexually assaulting women to killing, starting with Carla's own sister, 15-year-old Tammy Homolka. Paul had been disappointed that Carla was not a virgin when they got together, so Carla basically delivered her baby sister to Paul as a Christmas present, wishing to gift her virginity to him. The f*** is wrong with you? He already had stolen her virginity before, after drugging and assaulting her, but semantics, I guess. While it's believed her death was accidental given the drugs and alcohol in her system and the halothane-soaked cloth on her face, she died all the same, choking on her own vomit. That didn't stop them, though. Even when some people started suspecting that the two of them were up to no good, Paul continued assaulting women and killing them, all while Carla encouraged his evil behavior and helped him lure in more victims. With Carla's help, Paul sexually assaulted, tortured, sodomized, and killed 14-year-old Leslie Mahaffey and 15-year-old Kristen French. Leslie was cut to pieces and dumped in Lake Gibson in 1991, each body part tied to cement blocks so they would sink, while Kristen was dumped naked in a ditch in Burlington in 1992, like trash. And all the while, there are even more victims whose names were either lost to time or have simply been kept from the public at their request. In total, between the murders and sexual assaults, it's thought that Bernardo has up to 30 victims to his name. Most of them could probably have been saved had the police labs hustled with their jobs. Yeah. Thankfully, the police did get around to testing Paul's sample. Yeah, man, after 2 years. And wouldn't you know it, in December 1992, it came back as a match for the Scarborough rape. Afterwards, the police finally started keeping tabs on him. They even got Carla to flip on him, and in February 1993, he was arrested. Fast forward to September 1st, 1995, and Paul Bernardo was found guilty on numerous counts, including first-degree murder, kidnapping, and aggravated sexual assault before being sent away for the rest of his life. Carla is long free. No! And out on the streets. And that's another story entirely. It's just so frustrating because had the police and the lab done their job with any sort of expediency, testing the DNA voluntarily given by the monster, he could have been caught long before lives were lost. I can't emphasize that enough. He gave them his DNA, the very thing they needed to prove his guilt, and yet they let it sit there until things escalated in the worst way. You really can't make this shit up. No. I'd like to know more about the lab, like what the situation was there. Like whether those 130 other samples were just as important and it was just limits of the technology at the time. But either way, fuck this. Police versus the Zodiac. If America has an equivalent to Jack the Ripper, it is undoubtedly the case of the Zodiac Killer. To this day, no one knows who this monster is, despite the best efforts of all branches of law enforcement. On the surface, they have a confirmed body count of 7, and were only active for about a year, but there are 37 suspected cases that might be linked to the Zodiac, with the final victim being killed in 1970. It all started on December the 20th, 1968, with 16-year-old Betty Lou Jensen and 17-year-old David Arthur Faraday. That night, they went to a local lover's lane for some alone time, only to be met with death. The car arrived soon after they did, blocking off their route, and the driver got out, pistol in hand, and gunned them both down in cold blood. The next attack happened in a parking lot at Blue Rock Springs Park, another lover's lane, shortly after midnight on July the 4th, 1969. 22-year-old Darlene Ferrin and 19-year-old Michael McGough were the victims, and as soon as they arrived, another car pulled up about 80 feet away, only to speed away right after. Doreen and Michael were confused, but then 5 minutes later, the car came back, shining a light into the car to blind them. The attacker unloaded several shots inside, killing Doreen and injuring Michael, though he would survive. Soon they would be found, the shots having attracted attention, and they were taken to hospital where Doreen was pronounced dead. Soon after they arrived, though, a call came in to 911. Okay. Quote, "I want to report a double murder. If you go 1 mile east on Columbus Parkway to the public park, you'll find kids in a brown car. They were shot with a 9mm Luger. I also killed those kids last year. Goodbye." The killer had actually called the cops. Michael was able to describe their attacker once he managed to get his bearings. A heavy-set white man, around 5'8", 195 to 200 pounds, with a large face and curly light brown hair, wearing dark clothes, no glasses. It wasn't much to go on, but at least it was something. And soon after the second attack, the first letters arrived in the Vallejo Times, San Francisco Chronicle, and the San Francisco Examiner. All received the same letter, all claiming to be from the killer, and all containing a cipher that promised the name of the murderer to whoever cracked it. The signature? The Zodiac. To this day, most of the ciphers have never been fully solved, and whatever has been hasn't given a single clue as to the identity of the killer at all. September the 27th, 1969 was the day of the Lake Berryessa murders. That day, 20-year-old Brian Hartnell and 22-year-old Cecilia Shepard were on a date by the lake. They were having a picnic together and enjoying a nice sunny day. That was until a large man came up and ruined it all, wearing an executioner's hood. It's gonna be fucking creepy, dude. You're just having a picnic in the park and this dude in an executioner's hood rocks up. You'd be like, what is this? After pulling a gun and tying the couple up, he didn't even have the decency to make it quick, instead brandishing a knife and stabbing them both, Brian 6 times and Cecilia 10 times. They were found and taken to the hospital, and while Brian managed to survive, giving a detailed description of the person who attacked them, Celia was too far gone, lapsing into a coma and dying soon after. Look, I'm not a big person for carrying guns around or whatever, but I don't know, man. If I was in America where everyone could carry around guns and shit, I'd be like, yeah, maybe, if I had a gun at that picnic, I'd just be like, hey, motherfucker, fuck off. Don't try any shit. The final attack happened on October the 11th, 1969, only a couple of weeks after the last one. That night, a man hailed a cab in downtown San Francisco. Paul Stein, a doctoral student who was working as a cab driver on the side, pulled up asking, "Where to?" The man got comfortable, said a destination in Presidio Heights, and away they went. Arriving at the destination, the man asked to be taken just one street over, and upon arriving, the man withdrew his gun and shot Paul point-blank in the head, killing him instantly. The crime was witnessed by teenagers in a house across the street, where they clearly saw the man's face under a streetlight. Good lord. The Zodiac then wiped down the car and rifled through Paul's clothes, but ended up leaving partial fingerprints at the scene. The kids, this was 1960, yeah, but fingerprints are a thing, guys. Come on now. The kids called 911, telling them all they saw, including all they could about the killer, a large, husky white man with a dark jacket. So what happened? And how did the police, along with the dispatcher, mess up so badly that we still don't know who this is to this day? But we could have. Simple. They got his skin color wrong. You see, the teenagers very specifically said that the man who did it was a white man. No doubt about it. And yet, as they sped toward the scene, they spoke with confidence the suspect was black. How you messed that one up? It's pretty wild. And the kicker, 2 nearby patrolmen quickly responded to the call. On their way there, they came across a white man heading in the opposite direction. Instead of stopping him and questioning him about the incident, they asked if he'd seen a black man with a gun in the area. And the man said that he had, that a crazed man was waving a gun around and running in the other direction. The cops thanked him and drove off, and the Zodiac Killer walked off into the night, supposedly never to be seen again. Oh my god, guys. It's not these 2 patrolmen's fault, it's whoever told them to look for a black guy instead of the Zodiac Killer, who they're like, "Thank you, kind sir, have a wonderful evening," after he just executed someone in a taxi. Arthur Lee Allen, Richard Gajkowski, Paul Durr, Earl Van Best Jr., Carl Francis Post, they're all names that have been linked to the Zodiac, among several others, yet we still have far more questions than answers, and like Jack the Ripper, we most likely will never find out just who the Zodiac Killer really was. And to think, we could have already had the answer as well as justice for all those dead kids if the cops and dispatcher had simply gotten the information right. Maybe I don't know, the ciphers are still out there, right? People are working on those. People crack ciphers really a lot later. So maybe eventually we'll crack the ciphers and then it'll probably be like, haha, no chance. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe ChatGPT could fix that shit. Police versus Robert Napper. Railroading is a classic in police mess-ups. Robert Clive Napper, aka the Green Chain Rapist, or the other one beginning with an R. I think we can say that. We'll just bleep it out, right? Because rapist just sounds silly. The Green Chain Rapist is a serial killer and serial sexual assaulter from over the pond in jolly old England. Not over the pond for me, that's where I'm from. With body, just in case you couldn't tell. With body count of 3, he isn't the most notorious monster on the docket, but when it comes to why we're talking about him here today, it's another 2 for 1. Born in London on February the 25th, 1966, Napper had it rough from the word go. He grew up watching his father beat on his mother, and when his parents finally got a divorce, Napper and his siblings were sent into foster care. And while there, he was provided with psychological treatment and evaluation for over 6 years. Quick reminder that he was 9 at the time, so he had to go through all of this until he was 15. Once he was evaluated, though, it became clear why he seemed different from the other kids. Napper would eventually be diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome and later full-blown paranoid schizophrenia. That's some pretty serious shit right there. This is already something awful, but it's about to get even worse. When he was only 12 years old, Napper went on a camping trip with a family friend, and that family friend got too friendly, if you catch my meaning. Oh, I do, Matt, and that's pretty fucked up. The man was jailed, but after that, Napper was a changed kid. Yeah, this is it's so fucked up. You're just ruining someone's life. Stop. He was awkward. and quiet, introverted and timid, feeling totally powerless. And what does a hurt kid do when he feels powerless? Well, he starts bullying others to make them feel even more powerless than him, namely his siblings. And on top of that, being abused seemed to have snapped something fairly vital in him, and he started watching his little sister dress and undress in secret. At 16, he dropped out of school, and as his behavior was only getting more and more creepy, he was kicked out by his mother at 18, since she did not wish to put up with him anymore. He was eventually able to land on his feet and managed to get himself a job at a place to live, but the dark thoughts remained, and soon he would act upon them. And this is where we find the first issue with the police at actually doing their job. In November of 1989, Pauline Napper called 999. That's the British 911, by the way. After getting through to the police, she informed them that her son Robert had reached out to her. He had actually confessed to and confided in her that he had committed a rape back in August of that year, that of a 31-year-old woman. When someone's own mother is reporting their son for something like this, police, listen, this isn't just a random call from a stranger, it's their mother. She lived in Plumstead Common with her 2 children and was attacked in her home. While her kids were downstairs watching television, Napper had gone upstairs, surprised her as she was getting out of the shower, and then ordered her to get onto the bed. He tied her up before assaulting her, then apologized, and left the house. Several months passed before he'd bragged about it to his mum and told her that he'd raped a woman on Plumstead Common, as in the park, not the neighborhood. Okay. Plumstead, what was it called? Plumstead Common. On Plumstead. Oh, okay, I see. So on rather than in, I guess. And what did the police do with this information? Not a thing. What? You'd think that that would be enough to get the attention of investigators. Yeah, you would, wouldn't you, Matt? It seems like something they would look into. But no case on file matched anything Pauline was telling them, and Napper didn't match any suspects in any of those they did have. And so her concerns were dismissed. Napper wasn't brought in for questioning or even looked into, and the police never looked into her claims. Again, when it's someone's mother reporting them, pay attention, you dicks! After this, Pauline truly wanted nothing to do with her son, and with the police dismissing him entirely, they basically allowed the evil to come to take place. From there, Napper is tentatively linked to being the green chain responsible for over 70 attacks on women in the streets of southeast London and on the Green Chain Walk. And even though he was questioned during this time, he was eliminated from suspicion despite the reports that his mother filed on him. Why was he dismissed? But one of Napper's colleagues told the police that not only was he a match for the description of the Green Chain rape, but he was also a paranoid schizophrenic, so the police asked him to come in and provide them with a sample of his DNA. When he didn't show up for his appointment, they sent a reminder, and when he didn't show up the second time, they dismissed him because their suspect was reported to be between 5'7" and 5'9", and Napper was 6'2". It's like, he doesn't come in twice, they're just like, okay, fine, whatever. Don't bother them, mate. It's okay. And it wouldn't be long into this reign of terror that he would get a body count. Rachel Nichol was the first, being raped and killed on July the 15th, 1992, in front of her 2-year-old son Alex, while they were out walking on Wimbledon Common. The poor boy clung to his dead mother until they were found, crying and begging for his mummy to wake up. And this is where we reach the second part of the police nonsense. Remember how I mentioned railroading? Well, the police had brought in a criminal profiler, and the profile had drawn up for Rachel Nichol's attacker perfectly matched a man named Colin Stagg, an unemployed man who often walked his dog in the area and owned books on the occult. He had a previous accusation for indecent exposure. An accusation, that's it? What's his face? Napper had a previous accusation of fucking rape from his own mother. Despite this accusation, Stagg was adamant that he was simply sunbathing in the nude in a remote area, and a woman just happened to notice him. Well, I mean, then don't sunbathe nude in public, mate. Come on. It's not France. Regardless, this was seen as him being a sexual deviant, and they locked in on him hard. They even had a female officer go undercover in a honey trap plan called Operation Edsel in hopes of him confessing to her after they had formed a relationship. But when he was directly asked if he'd murdered Rachel with the promise of sex, if he actually did, he was very candid. I'm terribly sorry, but I haven't. Stagg was nevertheless arrested for the crime. What the fuck? But thankfully, once it reached the Old Bailey, his case was thrown out instantly, given how preposterous it was. Sadly, in the meantime, Napper would rape many more women and kill 2 more, including the 27-year-old Samantha Bissett and a 4-year-old daughter, Jasmine Jemima Bissett. He stalked them for weeks beforehand, and then attacked them and killed them in their home. stabbing Samantha repeatedly before smothering Jasmine and sexually defiling the toddler's body. How old? 4, what the fuck? Thankfully, he was eventually caught and arrested in May of 1994, convicted in October 1995, and sentenced to indefinite detention in a psychiatric hospital where he remains to this day. Good, and he should never leave. He was even linked to Rachel's murder in 2004 based on DNA, which he too was found guilty of. And to think, had the police simply looked into his mother's claims and not so recklessly taken him off the suspect list, none of this would have happened. Police versus Mark Dutroux. Kidnapping, murder, a terrible trio, and one that this man specialized in. Mark Paul Allen Dutroux was arguably one of the worst and most publicized monsters in the history of Belgium. He usually had accomplices, and with a body count of 4 murders as well as 11 sexual assaults, this piece of filth got away with a lot. And honestly, a lot of that is thanks to the police. Born in Ixelles in Brussels on November 6, 1956, Dutroux was one of 5 children and is reported to have been abused regularly by his parents. No surprises there, but again, not an excuse for growing up and being a piece of shit murderer rape. Plenty of people who are abused by their parents and don't grow up to be murdering rapists. In fact, probably the majority, Mark. His parents taught him it was acceptable to inflict pain on those who were weaker than you. It goes without saying at this point, but don't f up your kids. Indeed. Growing up, he would eventually marry his first wife, the 17-year-old Françoise Dubois, in 1976, and the couple had 2 children together, but because of his own abusive behavior, she divorced him in 1983. By this time, though, he was already getting in trouble with the law. Between assault, drug dealing, and trading stolen vehicles, he was well known to the police and had already spent some time in prison for petty crimes. While in his crime-laden stretch, he made it a priority to have numerous mistresses when he wasn't inappropriately touching girls at the ice rink, that is. And one of them was Michelle Martin. As creepy and unhinged as he clearly is, he must have done something right since she actually married him. That didn't keep him from seducing other women, though, and he quickly graduated from touching to outright violation. You can still be a piece of shit and be charming. They are not mutually exclusive, and you can be attractive and a piece of shit as well. These things are not, It's like, he's charming and handsome. He can't be a piece of shit. We absolutely can. According to Michelle, quote, I recall that prior to the first series of kidnappings in 1985, Mark Dutroux approached me, claiming I was responsible for the fact that he could no longer seduce as many women as he would have liked. He felt that other women showed less interest in him because he was living with me. I remember that during that period, we even slept apart for a while. It was at that time that Mark Dutroux told me that he planned to kidnap girls. He told me that kidnapping and raping them took less time than seducing them. He said that this would be to my benefit as well. That way, he would have more time to devote to me. Bro, what is wrong with your fucking brain? The quote continues, and since, after all, he was doing it all for my sake, I was obliged to assist him with the kidnappings. Go to the police, please go to the police immediately. It was in December 1985 that he abducted his first confirmed victim, that being 11-year-old Sylvie D. Aided by his wife. Oh my god, no. No, Michelle, what are you doing? You go to the police! And an accomplice named Jean-Van Peterham, the teenager was imprisoned in Mark Dutroux's home at 128 Route de Philippeville for a full 24 hours and was raped over and over by both men. She's 11. And she was just first. 19-year-old Maria V, 15-year-old Elizabeth G, 14-year-old Axel D, 18-year-old Catherine D. All of them were kidnapped and raped. Thankfully, he was arrested in February 1986 and imprisoned for it in April 1989. Bring back the death penalty, Belgium, maybe? Unfortunately, while he received only 13 years for it. What? That's outrageous! How many people? He raped an 11-year-old! The fuck? But he only ended up serving 3 years of his sentence on account of good behavior. Any time I hear about fucking police or justice or government or anything to do with the state of Belgium, I'm always like, what the fuck? Belgium. What the for a country that houses the European Union's Belgium. It's like, what the fuck is going on in Belgium, you incompetent clowns? Sorry, anyone who's Belgian listening, but Jesus Christ, your government and police and everything about you, I always hear is just incompetence. Oh, but you make excellent beer. And after gaining his freedom, he wasted no time. He wanted women he could use and abuse at his leisure, and so he created a dungeon in his basement to keep them once he took them. First, he kidnapped 8-year-old Melissa Russo and Julie Lejeune, drugged them, sexually assaulted them, and then kept them locked in a cage in his basement. Just a quick reminder, even though it was literally 2 minutes ago, this guy raped an 11-year-old and spent 3 years in prison for it. And now he's up to this. This is why we bring back the death penalty or we throw away the fucking key, Belgium. Come on now. It doesn't matter how well behaved you are in prison, you don't get to leave. Can you imagine being the parents of that 11-year-old? Allegedly, I would hunt him down. Be like, Belgium, you can't do it? Guess I'll take care of this shit myself. Allegedly. Then he kidnapped a 17-year-old, Anne Machal, and 19-year-old Ifche Lambrex, sexually assaulted them, and then chained them to beds in his house. Together with one of his accomplices, Bernard Weinstein, he'd kill Anne and Ifche by drugging them, wrapping them in plastic, and burying them alive in the backyard of his house in Jubit. They'd later be joined by Bernard, who Dutroux had come to see as a liability. And Julie and Melissa, the 8-year-olds, they starved to death in that cage after Dutroux was sent to prison for several months and his wife Michelle refused to feed them. Michelle, you also need to go to prison forever. Once he was released from prison, Dutroux buried them in his garden, the house at Sans-le-Brissaire, and then went out and kidnapped 12-year-old Sabine Dardenne and 14-year-old Laetitia Dahez. Oh my god. So with that said, what about the cops? Where were they? There were numerous children and young ladies disappearing off the streets in the span of a couple of years. Surely the police were up to something, right? I don't know. It is Belgium. But apparently they were. Hey! But I wouldn't blame you for thinking they weren't doing a blessed thing. First of all, Janine Lawrence, Dutroux's own mother, wrote a letter to the police in 1995. The contents, the fact that she knew her son had kidnapped girls and was keeping them in his home. Again, police, when it's someone's own mother grassing on their children, pay the attention, come on. And what did they do? Nothing at all. By this time, Melissa and Julie had been taken and were living in the dungeon in the basement, while the police sat outside Dutroux's home and read the newspaper. It wasn't until Laetitia was kidnapped and another branch of the police made the link between Dutroux and the girls that he was finally arrested. By that time, 4 of the girls were dead, and his other victims had been raped and tortured over and over again. The worst part, with him being the prime suspect long before he was arrested, Dutroux actually had police at his home, walking around, investigating, not once but twice, and they came away with nothing. What, they're like, they're searching his house, and they're like, so mate, do you have a basement? He's like, no. No, officers, no basement. Thanks for stopping by. What's this door? That's a cupboard. That's just a cupboard, you don't need to look in there, it's just tins. On December the 13th and the 19th, 1995, police officers searched his house and apparently found nothing, despite hearing the 2 8-year-olds talking to one another. And no, I'm not kidding, they could literally hear the girls' voices while they were searching the house, but they never followed up on any of it. And they took Dutroux at his word that the extensive construction in his basement was for a new drainage system. I'm seriously getting flashbacks of Joseph Fritzl here. They simply left, not trying to investigate further, even when they found the videotapes in the home. Videotapes that contained recordings of all the rapes he'd committed. Oh my God, Belgian police! I don't understand! They never once thought to watch any of those. They just let him continue on, allowing the next girls to be kidnapped and raped by this terrible man. Frustrating is not a strong enough word. And if you'll permit me, Simon, a quick D&D reference. I know nothing about D&D other than that it stands for Dungeons and Dragons. But these idiots failed their insight and perception checks in that home, so fuck that. I assume all the people who know D&D get that reference. Excellent. Thankfully, he was arrested on August the 13th, 1996, after another investigative team linked him to Laetitia's disappearance. Charged with child pornography, child sexual abuse, kidnapping, murder, and theft, there were many hold-ups in the case, including a brief escape by Dutroux and the refusal to test the many hairs found within the dungeon. He probably escaped because they just like, all right, Dutroux, we don't have a prison. We're just going to lock you in this room in the police station. And then they just forgot to lock the door. And so he just walked out. I mean, I don't know if that's what actually happens, but it's Belgium. I could believe it. Shitting on Belgium today. Love you, my Belgian friends. It wasn't until 2004 that the trial was set in motion, and with all the Belgium watching, many protesting the obvious mishandling of the case, Dutroux and his accomplices were all found guilty on all counts, and on June the 22nd, 2004, he was sentenced to life in prison. However, that was not the end of the case, because a life sentence in Belgium doesn't mean a life sentence. He was released on good behaviour after 6 months. No, he wasn't, I'm making that up, but you could almost believe it, couldn't you? You would almost been like, yeah, okay, makes sense. In 2013, he tried to make a request for early release, please, stating that he was no longer a danger to society. Bro, you already went to prison. Was this the guy who went to prison once? Yeah, and then he came out for good behavior, and then he did all that crazy shit. No, dude, no. But the courts shut him down cold, as they should. Frankly, I think Belgian Senator Anne-Marie Lizin said it best when it comes to the insanity of how Dutroux managed to escape justice for so long. Quote, "Stupidity by the police can't be the only explanation. It's a question of stupidity, incompetence, and corruption. Dutroux must be a friend of someone important, or else he was being protected because he was known to be a police informant." Yeah, maybe, or just it really is incredible incompetence. Like, I really could just be incredible incompetence. Police versus Ted Bundy. At the beginning of this episode, we covered Jeffrey Dahmer, so to me, it's only appropriate to cover what could be considered the other half of that coin. Ted Bundy, the lady killer, was one of the most despicable and evil men to ever walk this earth, and one of the most notorious serial killers of all time. With 20 confirmed murders, 30 confessed, and suspected to have up to 36, he's a monster in human skin that, thankfully, is not anyone's problem any longer. I forget, did they execute Ted Bundy? Pretty sure, right? He's dead, I know he's dead. But I hope they lethal injection? Electric chair? Something like that? A happy ending? For us who'd like to see serial killers put to death. Born on November the 24th, 1946 in Burlington, Vermont, Theodore Robert Cowell was off to a rocky start from the word go. Again, right? Don't fuck up your kids. His mother was Eleanor Louise Cowell, though he never knew his father, and that detail has remained a mystery even to this day. Because his mother was unwed when he was conceived and birthed, his grandparents raised him as their own son to avoid the usual stigma of a child born out of wedlock. A silly thing, I know, but it was the 40s after all. The past was the worst. As such, his mother played the role of his sister. But of course, the little family charade couldn't last forever, and when Ted found out the truth, he was a bastard, he was destroyed. Because of this, along with her being unwilling to tell him about his real father, Bundy began to despise his mother as a result. It's a bit harsh. Eventually, his mother would marry a cook named Johnny Bundy, who formally adopted Ted, giving him his last name. It's a nice thing to do. But even after getting some form of stability in his household, Bundy was still headed down a terrible path. From peeping at women undressing to reading crime magazines and novels specifically for the grisly violence against women, something had gone wrong in his head, that's for sure. And it didn't help that he had never gotten the hang of actual social skills. He was considered extremely handsome, why I'll never know, so folks were drawn to him, especially women, but he never got a handle on how to really act or feel with people. Oh wait, I mean, I don't know, I've seen pictures of Ted Bundy, he's a pretty good looking dude. No, it's not fucking good to say. He's a fucking psycho murderer piece of shit. Quoting, Bundy, "I didn't know what made people want to be friends. I didn't know what underlay social interactions. Some people perceive me as being shy and introverted. I didn't go to dances. I didn't go on the beer drinking outings. I was a pretty, you might call me straight, but not a social outcast in any way." Oh god. I know this is a horrific place to bring this up, but I was putting my daughter to bed the other day, and she's like, "Dad, I have lots of friends." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's nice. It's, why do you think that is?" And she says, "I think it's because I don't like to hurt people." And I'm like, "Okay." And then she says, "And also, maybe my face." And I'm like, "Your face?" And she's like, "Yeah, I don't know. I just thought maybe it could be my face." And I'm like, it's a weird thing to say, but okay. I was like, "Sure, dear. Go to sleep." Oh god, let's get back to Ted Bundy. He went on to college, dropped out, eventually re-enrolled, and all the while he actually found someone he seemed to like, a woman he seemed to enjoy spending time with. This was Elizabeth Clofer, a single mother to her little daughter Molly and a secretary at the UW School of Medicine. Born December 31st, 1946, she was 22 when she met Bundy in October of 1969 at the Sandpiper Tavern in Seattle, Washington. She thought he was handsome and charming, as all women did, and the two seemed to hit it off, starting a relationship that lasted 7 years. It got to the point where Molly started to see Bundy as a father figure, even when things started getting noticeably worse. Oh, sorry, Molly's the daughter. I'm like, why is she seeing him as a father figure? And it's like, oh, because that's the daughter. Use your brain, Simon. Try and keep track of the characters. Elizabeth wanted commitment, marriage even. Bundy didn't. Yet even when they agreed to see other people, Bundy always came back, berating her for cheating on him and insisting they stay together. Bro, when you say, yeah, we can see other people, you can't then be like, you cheated on me. What the... No, Bundy, no. Every time they broke things off, it never lasted, and they always found their way back to one another. Quote, this is kind of hard to think about, but if you put aside the fact that Ted Bundy was a terrible, murderous man, he was also a... Who's that quote from, Matt? I don't even know. He was also a bad boyfriend. I guess it's from... Elizabeth? It'd like some attribution there, but okay. This was also before it was revealed that starting when Molly was 7, Ted Bundy had begun abusing her, both physically and sexually. Fucking hell, punching her in the face and exposing himself to her, and touching her inappropriately, and passing it off as playing games. 7, bro. The fuck? But why am I focusing on Elizabeth so much here? The month, that is. Because she had the gumption to speak up when she smelled something foul. It was 1974, after Bundy got a job in Olympia, when young women started going missing, with a number of them, unfortunately, never found, remains or otherwise. Bundy would later confess that he had made attempts in 1971 and 1972 to kidnap and kill women, but had failed in those attempts, and any so-called successes during that time have never been verified as fact. He hit his stride in 1974, though, and he did so with hideous swiftness. 18-year-old Karen Sparks was attacked in her own home, brutally beaten with a metal rod, and sexually assaulted, then left for dead, having incurred many injuries, including severe brain damage. 21-year-old Lydia Ann Healy was next, attacked in her home, knocked out and whisked away, only to be murdered and dumped soon after. 19-year-old Donna Gail Manson, 18-year-old Susan Elaine Rancourt, 22-year-old Roberta Kathleen Parks, 22-year-old Brenda Carroll Bell, 18-year-old George and Hawkins, 23-year-old Janice Ann Out, 19-year-old Denise Marie Naslund, and those are just the ones in Washington and Oregon. All young, attractive white women, all college age, and all with long hair parted in the middle. It was extremely specific. And wouldn't you know it, almost all of them had a passing resemblance to his mother when she was young. Coincidence? No, I think not. At this point, the police had come to the understanding that a killer was on the loose, and they even had an idea of what he did to lure the ladies in. Numerous witnesses, women who didn't fall for his tricks, told officers that a young man, either in a sling or on crutches, would come up to them asking for help, usually with car trouble or unloading something from his car, that being a brown or tan Volkswagen Beetle. He even introduced himself as Ted. Giving the game away a little bit there, Ted-o. As time went on, the relationship between Bundy and Elizabeth continued to worsen. She noticed he'd start coming home later and later, looking more and more tired each time. And at times, he would leave their bed and head out into the night without any explanation. At first, she thought he was having an affair, especially when he refused to have sex with her any longer, but when she learned about the murders and disappearances of women going on, she started catching on. Then, after hearing the killer had introduced himself as Ted, drove a Beetle, and after seeing a police sketch of the suspect based on testimony from witnesses, it clicked. The dots were lining up far too easily, and Elizabeth called the police in late July 1974. I'm imagining her like Hank in Breaking Bad when he realizes that Walter is Heisenberg. He's just like, oh my god. There he is, like a fuck bottom falls out moment for the ages. Not that it did any good. You see, after Elizabeth talked to the cops, at first it seemed like it was leading nowhere. Their suspect was said to have straight hair, and the Beetle was bronze, while Bundy had curly hair and drove a tan Beetle. Elizabeth dropped it at that time, but the dots still continued to line up. In August 1974, she heard more details, namely about the man on crutches, and she had seen crutches in Ted's apartment. So she called again, but this too went nowhere. Then on Labor Day 1974, she called again after seeing more women and girls going missing in Utah, where Bundy had just arrived to attend law school. I mean, Jesus Christ. At this point, start gathering evidence and go to the... Who's she reporting this to? Did Matt just say the cops? Or like take this to the FBI, alternatively the press. Like, come on. I mean, you're absolutely doing a fine job already, but you got to take this to the big police or the press. But the cops simply brushed her off again. Why? Well, it's simple. Ted Bundy had no outstanding criminal record to speak of. Well, me neither, so I can never commit any crimes, I guess. Fantastic! And from the descriptions given of the suspect, Bundy seemed too old to be the man they were looking for. Not to mention the handsome law student with a promising future and career. No chance that guy was their killer. And so Ted Bundy's name languished in a pile of paperwork, all while the bestial man was still out there stealing girls off the street to assault and murder them. And he was eventually arrested on suspicion of murder, but even then the justice system couldn't hold on to him. The vile creature of a man was left alone in a library without cuffs to plan his defense, where he would then escape out of a window and flee to Florida. Bro, you gotta go a lot further than Florida, my dude. You gotta get to one. Florida is in the same country. You gotta go to like fucking Belize. Not Belize. I always used to say Belize, and then I found out there's no use hiding in Belize. Lebanon. Lebanon extradites nobody. It's a lot further away, though, and a lot different to Belize. Another monumental screw-up by the cops, and sadly, we know how things went from there. Bundy went on to kill several girls in a sorority house before he was eventually caught again, this time staying locked up for good until he was found guilty. And after that, it was all over, except for the electric chair. Hey! As for Elizabeth, she cut Bundy out of her life long before he was on the wrong side of old Sparky. Not only had he admitted to attempting to kill her at one point, but he also confessed to her that he'd done terrible things but tried to play it off as if he was sick, that his body was being controlled by a powerful force. Quoting, "The force would just consume me. Like one night I was walking by the campus and I followed the sorority girl. I didn't want to follow her. I try not to, but I do it anyway." That's not a excuse. That's not an excuse. She wanted nothing to do with him after that, and spent a long time trying to come to terms with the fact that she'd been in love with a murderer. Today, Bundy's long gone, and she's doing well, having written a book about her experiences, The Phantom Prince. She even had her experiences with Bundy made into a movie, extremely wicked, shockingly evil and vile, where she's played by Lily Collins, and Bundy by Zac Efron. It's good to know that after all that, she's doing rather good for herself, even if she's still occasionally haunted by the ghosts of her past. Yeah, good for you. You really tried to get the police to pay attention to this, and they didn't. I'm sorry that happened. Quoting her, "For a long time I lived with the guilt of wondering if Ted saw me in these women, if killing them was a sick, compulsive effort to kill something he hated in me." End quote. And end entry. Police versus Peter Sutcliffe. So let's end today with one that honestly actively pisses me off to this day. This man, this case, and every aspect of it were handled so... This is a UK one, right? I remember Peter Sutcliffe. This was covered more recently on this channel. It was handled so badly by the so-called authorities that it still boils my blood every time it comes up. Well, let's see if my home country police could compete with the Belge. Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper. For 5 years, he terrorised the locals in both West Yorkshire and Manchester. I say locals, but it was exclusively women, whether they were sex workers or otherwise. It didn't matter to him as long as they were dead. And the amount of police incompetence here, it is actually mind-blowing. Peter William Sutcliffe was born on June 2nd, 1946 in Bingley, West Riding of Yorkshire, to parents John William Sutcliffe and Kathleen Frances Coonan. He was shown cruelty from fairly early on when his father would physically abuse his mother, who was his safe haven from the rest of the world. That all changed when it was revealed that she had been seeking solace in another man, which seemed to ruin his view of women forever. Women were things not to be trusted, things to be overpowered and browbeaten, and something to be used and thrown away when you're done. After leaving school and eventually getting married, things didn't get any better. His wife, Sonia, was harsh and a domineering person, belittling him at every turn. On top of that, she was prone to fits of rage, beating on him as she talked down to him. Peter's anger and hatred for women only grew and grew, especially when it was discovered that not only could they not have children, but she was cheating on him. After that, he couldn't take it anymore. And so, using the knowledge he gained from his time as an HGV, heavy goods vehicle, that's like a 16-wheeler truck, Americans, for T&WH Clark Holdings Limited, he went on to murder at least 13 women and injure several others. He stalked all of these women in the dead of night. They could have been returning home from work, on the streets looking to pick up Johns for money, or just out enjoying the night air. It did not matter to Peter Sutcliffe. He would simply approach them, attack them, usually smash them in the head with a hammer, sometimes multiple times, before stabbing them and ruining their clothes. Alright, he never sexually assaulted them, not once. It was all about humiliation and death for him. These women, whether they were promiscuous or not, didn't matter to him in the least. They all deserved to die because all women did. All women were liars. All women were less than. All women were filthy, dirty, and profane. Wilma McCann, Emily Jackson, Irene Richardson, Patricia Tina Atkinson-Mitra, Jane McDonald, Jean Jordan, Yvonne Pearson, Eleanor Helen Ritka, Vera Millwood, Josephine Whittaker, Barbara Babs Leach, Margaret Walls, Jacqueline Hall, all slashed, all beaten, all dead at the hands of this evil man. And of course all the injured, many traumatized for life. The police had ample opportunity and time to take down this monster. Instead, more often than not, they're not the ones remembered. Instead, it's their killer that gets the attention of the masses, now almost solely known as the Yorkshire Ripper. So, where did the cops go wrong? Well, the easy answer is just with pretty much everything. The first thing is that at the beginning of this case, as the bodies had just started to drop, the police had begun labeling all the victims as sex workers, even when they weren't. That's fucking outrageous. Like, someone gets murdered. Imagine this is your friend or your relation, and they're like, oh yeah, I mean a murder, but they're a sex worker. It's like, they weren't a sex worker, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? They lived in or near the red light district of Yorkshire, so it seemed easy enough to just assume that they were a bunch of dead prostitutes and not look much more into it. That started to change, of course, with the discovery of Jane McDonald's body, a hard-working 16-year-old student, and even then they tried to stick to the previous narrative as much as possible. They tried to say the Ripper had mistaken her for a sex worker. But the public wasn't having it, and the cops were getting dunked on terribly because of it. And all of this brings us to George Oldfield, a senior officer with a well-earned reputation. He was put on the case, even though he'd never really dealt with murder cases before, and by the end of the case, said reputation was in the toilet, and he looked like an incompetent moron. It got to the point where he basically begged the Ripper to give himself up. And now the big one. The accent, and the police's unwillingness to let it go. Oh, I remember this detail. At this point, the officers had been receiving letters directly to the department claiming to be from the killer. Very Jack-coded, to be sure. Then on the 17th of June 1979, a cassette tape addressed to Oldfield was delivered to the police department, one with a message allegedly from the killer. Quote, "I'm Jack. I see you are having no luck catching me. I have the greatest respect for you, George. But Lord, you are no nearer to catching me now than 4 years ago when I started. I reckon your boys are letting you down, George. They can't be much good, can they? I'm not quite sure when I will strike again, but it will definitely be sometime this year. I'm not sure where, maybe Manchester. I like it there. There's plenty of them knocking about. They never learn, do they, George? At the rate I'm going, I should be in the book of records. I think it's 11 up to now, isn't it? Well, it's been nice chatting to you, George. Yours, Jack the Ripper." End quote. Now, first off, the tape was fake. Sutcliffe said nothing to the police, not once, and yet the cops fell for this. Even when experts told them over and over that it wasn't genuine, they clung desperately to it, especially since they barely had any real evidence to speak of. That's that railroading that we mentioned earlier. Even worse, the so-called killer on the tape spoke with a Geordie accent, and because they were so sure the tape was real, they believed that the killer was a Geordie, and they disregarded anyone that didn't have the proper accent. It didn't matter that survivors said the Ripper had a Yorkshire accent. None of that mattered. It was Geordie or nothing for them. And it hindered the entirety of the investigation. It's honestly shocking that Sutcliffe was caught at all, even by accident, especially when he was actually interviewed by the police about the Ripper case a total of 9 times, even after they got a description of the guy, and they let him walk every time. But indeed, Peter Sutcliffe was captured. He was put on trial for all of his crimes and found guilty of them all. Given initially only 30 years behind bars, he was resentenced later to a whole life tariff. Yes, obviously. How did that not... Should have been the first time! And thankfully, he had a rather rough time of it behind bars. Yay! Being attacked several times and almost losing his sight in a couple of them. In the end, that life tariff was pretty appropriate because he ended up serving to the fullest, dying in 2020 from COVID. Perhaps the only positive thing that godforsaken disease gave to the world. Yeah, I'd just rather have been stabbed to death in prison or something. Can't someone have killed him in prison? They even managed to catch the man who had been sending those letters and that damn cassette tape in 2005 thanks to DNA evidence. The man who became known as Wearside Jack was one John Humble, a little nobody of a man who had an unhealthy fascination with the Ripper and just wanted to be famous like him. By that time, he knew what he'd done was wrong, given that he basically ruined the initial investigation. Police should have been more competent and not just assumed that it was their guy. I mean, obviously this guy, a piece of shit doing this, but it's also a heavy heaping of police incompetence. He was deservedly locked up in 2006, being released in 2009 before dying from heart failure in 2019. I think I actually wrote it best in the official script for this episode, and I'm quite proud of it, so here it is. Peter Sutcliffe was not caught because of George Oldfield, nor from anyone on the task force. Peter Sutcliffe was caught because of dumb luck, pure and simple. There was no good police work, there was no successful manhunt, and he was found by a stroke of pure chance. In my opinion, Oldfield and the police were a complete and utter joke for 5 full years, with every last death on their streets on their shoulders. They let the misogyny and prejudice guide their judgment, clinging to the idea of Sutcliffe being purely a killer of sex workers, even when it was disproven over and over again. They were so desperate to have any sort of clue or lead that as soon as they received the fake tape and heard the subject had a Geordie accent, that was all they needed, and damn anyone who said different. I'm truly sorry, but I cannot be nice about this. To call them incompetent would be a kindness. They were embarrassment. End of story. And, well, that's a wrap, isn't it? Not as detailed as the official videos of all of these cases. As official. They're just published by this channel. So do go and check them out if you haven't already, but we're here for the fuck-ups and trying to understand why they happened. That said, these are hands down some of the absolute worst scrubs imaginable when it comes to police work, and frankly, there are plenty others we could have talked about. And it's not just police. The justice system as a whole, worldwide, has made some god-awful decisions and judgment calls, good intentions or not, that caused a lot of pain and misery. Another video down the line, perhaps? Well, we'll just have to see how we go. But before we go, I feel this needs to be said. Outside of the Zodiac, and to an extent Lopez, all of these reprehensible men were eventually caught and given the punishment they deserved. I don't know. I'd like to see more of them executed. The police at the end of the day did their jobs, the justice system did its job. It's easy to look back at all the incompetence, even funny if it's done poorly enough, but it's also easy to forget that there are good police officers, ones that do look out for communities, and ones that do work hard to catch the bad guys and bring them to justice. We should do an episode which is just like, often my favorite episodes are where it's like, there's a little bit of police confidence, and then some fucking legend police officer comes along and is like, all right, let's sort out this mess because I care, and just hunts. Love that shit. These days, it's easy to forget that, or just as easy to make yourself believe that all cops are evil, corrupt, lazy pigs. It's easy. But it's also not fully true and not fully fair. To serve and protect still holds water, especially when we do see killers and monsters brought to heel to face the courts. Yes, there are plenty of moronic and monstrous police officers out there, but there's good ones too. Ones that want to help, and ones that make mistakes sometimes. Despite the saying, one bad apple doesn't spoil the whole bunch. And given how most of these monsters ended up, I'd say there were some pretty good apples to go around. Yeah, look, we were just looking at the incompetence, so there's plenty of excellent police work, obviously. And that's where we end today's episode. Thank you so much for being here.